Hello, we are FAMNM Ri3D from Michigan, and this is our final cumulative bot overview video where we're going to go over the features of our bot, what we like about it, and what we think you should change if you want to do anything similar. So we will start out with Brandon and the algae.
So looking at our algae intake, one thing we want to design was something that was an active intake to take in the algae and would also work as a scoring mechanism in that same way. So when we made our design, we looked at a pivot, we did some prototyping, and ended with this design where we would take the algae, catch it up into these tape holders, and then go through it. So one of our favorite parts about this design is how many uses it has, and we can go through, we can use it to ride up walls and to even pop algae off of the reef, as well as use it as our main scoring mechanism while holding the intake. If you were to implement a design like this, one thing we highly recommend is adding some sort of powered lever, because we noticed that taking big hits against the walls could likely damage this, especially if you use 2x1. So another recommendation we have is possibly converting this to polycarb instead of using metal stock.
And so now we're going to move over to our main climber arm assembly. It doesn't actually climb, but we used a climber in a box from IndyMark to make this assembly. So it's a great option for teams, especially if you can't afford an elevator, which are more expensive but have some advantages. But here with our climber in a box, we're able to go from L2 to L4 just with sliding. One note is we had to upgrade these springs to beefier constant force springs. And that was just so that it could actually push up the weight of our arm with the added mass on top of it. We have just a Neo powering it at the bottom, and then it's attached with some 2x1. Generally, we're very happy with it. It's probably a little better suited for if you were to do an L2, L3 bot versus L4, because as it stows, because when it's stowed, it's higher than the height of the human player station, and so that made it really challenging to build out our funneling intake system. You could also use a 2 or 3 stage, you could also use a 3-stage option from West Coast Products as an alternative.
So then moving on to our next mechanism, this is our human player coral intake. This had to overcome the hurdle that the opening to our end effector here was higher than the human player station. We prototyped some active mechanisms and some passive ones, and this simple ramp with the funnel ended up working just fine. So when you load the coral through the human player station, it rides up and it's corralled by this funnel. It goes straight into the end effector, and it's nice and smooth, it's nice and quick, and we love that about it. Some things that teams could do if they wanted to improve on it is they could add some sort of active component, maybe a motor with a star gear on it or a green wheel on it. And other than that, it's a pretty good mechanism. It does fail sometimes because the corralling isn't the greatest, so that's another thing teams could improve on if they wanted to do this.
And then from there, it feeds up into our end effector, which is kind of a funnel system that we've actually been really happy with. Really haven't had issues with it falling out. And then we have a Neo 550 with a star that pushes it out. Generally, we've been happy with this. It probably needs a little bit of tuning for a final team. You might want to switch to a motor with higher torque versus just the no gearboxed Neo 550 that we've been using.
To get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of how we built it, some of the challenges we faced while building this coral intake was that we had to make it really high off the ground and in a stable position still. So these posts were pretty easy to install, but the harder part was installing support on this end. If you notice over here on the close-up, we actually piggybacked this bolt through the constant force spring into some custom L-channel brackets. These brackets are made on a bandsaw and they're bent, and it was probably the most complex part of this entire assembly. You can also see we used a lot of tape. That was more out of necessity than good practice. So if teams want to emulate this, we would recommend using more sustainable methods than duct tape and scrap metal.
So one thing I want to mention is for programming and overall design, this is obviously a tank drive bot, and a lot of the teams now are using Swerve. if you were to implement a design like this, going for maybe a level 4 climber, using an Animark climbing box or some kind of elevator, something you can keep in mind is you do not have to directly take from the back outwards. For tank drive, that is necessary because it makes your cycles much faster because you do not have to do any turning. But if you are working with a swerve drive, because that reef is a hexagonal shape, you can simply roll it into the side from your side and then go over and hit any side of that reef because again, it is a hexagonal shape. Another mention for the programming side of things is we did struggle a lot with the Spark Maxes this year, but it seems that the new firmware has been released. However, our code is still on the 2024 version. We are hoping maybe to get a 2025 version out to teams. If you have any questions about that, you can check out our GitHub that's linked on our Chief Delphi, or reply on our Chief Delphi thread, and we'll keep an eye on that to see how we can help.
Lastly, to talk about the wiring, it's a little messy. If we had more time, I would love to clean it up a bit. One thing that we did that I was pretty happy with is that we just added this piece of polycarb that's just on Velcro that's over top of most of our electronics, meaning that we can mount Spark Maxes in safe space, and it's really easy to just connect to the PDP. Pretty much all of our electronics are on this like belly pan thing that's like recessed, and it allowing it to be out of the way. Again, there's some like loose Spark Maxes that could be better mounted if you had more time. The big challenge that we had was wiring up this Neo at the top. We decided to use a brushless motor instead of a brush motor up there for weight reasons, meaning that we needed a Spark Max up there too. And that also meant we had to feed CAN about 6 feet from the loop to here. The big issue we had to make custom like CAN wires to be that long because we don't have any in stock, which led to some interesting challenges like the connectors not being crimped correctly and then having to do it a bunch of times. But in the end, it started working. Well, I like this wire channel, keeps the CAN wire connected all the way through because twisting it, sometimes it gets untwisted.
So overall, we had a quite successful year. We can cycle, we can do pretty much everything we set out to do except for climb. But we're sure there are going to be lots of great videos of other teams with climbers that you can take inspiration from. So thank you so much for following along on this journey, and this is FAM out.